It's easy to get to the end of a letter like 1 Corinthians and to see the author, in this case Paul, dealing with concerns that seem rather administrative and then greeting and saying farewell to various people and from various people. And it's easy to assume that this part of the letter doesn't matter so much, and yet I want to suggest that there's so much power in chapter 16 that helps us to begin to answer the question, so what? It's an important question always in Bible study. We've done a lot of in-depth research and analysis over all of these chapters of 1 Corinthians. We've looked at the city. We've looked at so many subjects, so many dynamics going on in this early Christian community and in this ancient city. And yet if we don't pause and ask and answer the so what question, well, what difference does it make? It's just historical inquiry, and yet it does not hold any power to shape our lives today. We as Christians, of course, know that's not true. And a great way to drill down into this truth is by looking at Paul's collection for Jerusalem in chapter 16. Now, we assume, as members of churches today, that it's common for ideally everyone to contribute, everyone at every income level. We often in evangelical churches preach tithing, where every person should give 10% of their income, regardless of whether that income is great or small. The ancient world didn't work this way. Instead, just as we saw several units ago in the convention of ancient patronage, it was the wealthy that were supposed to take care of the community, wealthy benefactors and wealthy patrons. The remarkable thing about Paul's collection is that everybody is supposed to participate and set aside a sum for the Christians in Jerusalem. That leads to the second strange and revolutionary point about this passage. Paul wants Gentile Christians all the way out in Corinth, many of whom are slaves, many of whom are very poor, many of whom must be destitute and living at the subsistence level. He still wants them to participate in sending their money to people that they had never met, people that were not their ethnicity, people who had been a part, according to the book of Acts, of persecuting their movement, at least by ethnicity. Paul wants to create that bond between Gentile Christians and Jewish Christians. And this is entirely the point, I believe, of the collection, that Paul sees the collection as a means to unite the global church and to show unity across ethnic, across cultural, across national boundaries, and to show the Roman Empire and the citizens of the Roman Empire that there is another way of doing life, doing community, and becoming fully human together, and that way of life is within the church. Surely everything that we've studied, the so what, comes back to that. This new revolutionary way of life that eschews status, that prizes equality. This new revolutionary way of life that holds sexuality in a new light, where people do not sue each other, that prizes and esteems the gift of marriage. This new way of life in which the strong are called to defer to the weak. Nobody had ever thought of that before. This new way of life with love at the centerpiece. We've seen it throughout 1 Corinthians. We see it in chapter 16. And I leave you with this. These three remain, as Paul says in 1 Corinthians 13, faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. Is that not, in the end, the real and pure and core message of this powerful letter?